with a short vart on the Parsha. Parsha Vayetzei. We're going to try, in deference to those who wanted a plethora of sources, not just coming from one thought of Hasidish or Litvish. We're going to try to get a little bit of everyone in a few moments. We finally are in Yaakov Avinu, so we now have the gamut of the Avos. We have Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We all know, Maisa Avos Simin Labanim. What the Avos did is a Simin Labanim, exactly how to explain that, what that means. We could talk about it at length. But the bottom line is we learn many, many lessons from the Avos, from their conduct, from how they acted. And we take home with us the Avos. And the question is, what do the Avos represent on a little bit of a deeper level? Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So I'm sure many know that there's Chesed, Din, and Emes. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, as amongst others. The Nesiv Shalom says something a little bit, we'll call it deeper maybe, a little more flavor. He says that we have three types of mitzvahs, three types of commandments from Hashem. Mitzvahs aseh, positive commandments. Mitzvahs lo aseh, negative commandments. And then we have divrei rishos, optional things. So says the Nesiv Shalom, that's at the depth of the Avos. Avram Avinu, we just said was Chesed. What's Chesed? Mitzvahs aseh, positive commandments. Yitzchak Avinu is Din. What is Din? Mitzvahs lo aseh. But Yaakov is always the tricky one. Yaakov is Emes. Yaakov is Torah. So how do we put Yaakov into this? Says the Nesiv Shalom, Yaakov is divrei rishos. Yaakov is more in the optional. Yaakov is more in the living within this world. We know Yaakov had all the issues with his father-in-law, dealt with extensively in the parashiyos, etc. So Yaakov is divrei rishos, that which you don't really need to do, but you really need to do. V'kadesh atzmecha b'muter lach. And the problem, I believe, is that whenever we hear these lines, we hear this usually Parshas Kedoshim, famously Kadesh Atzcha B'Muter Lach. The Ramban famously talks about a novel Bershus HaTorah, that there's that which is allowed, that which is not allowed, and then there's that which is deeper. But unfortunately, I think when we hear this, we get a little bit like, anxious, I think is the right word. Because we feel, Rabbi, let me deal with the black and white things. Let me deal with that which is mutter, that which is aser, divrei, mitzvahs aseh, mitzvahs lo aseh. Maybe one day I'll become a tzaddik. And I think that's our attitude a little bit when it comes to kedoshim, kadesh atzmecha, b'muter lach. But let's see maybe through looking a little bit deeper into what Yaakov Avinu really represented and how he acted, and maybe we could get a little bit of a newfound appreciation on divrei rishos, on the optional matters. So Ramosha Feinstein is medayik, and he learns the pasuk. We all know Yaakov Avinu is walking, he's traveling, and he passes by the Makom HaMikdash. He passes by the Makom HaMikdash. The psukim say, what does he do? He stops and he davens. Says Rashi, what happened over here? Says Rashi, he passed by the Makom HaMikdash, he stops, and all of a sudden, he davens. Says Rashi, that Har HaMoriah became where he was. We usually call this Kfitzas HaDerech. We know the Avos often traveled light years, light speed. They were in place A to place B like this. But says Ramosha, this is a different type of Kfitzas HaDerech. Usually Kfitzas HaDerech is if I'm traveling from point A to point B, and I'm a tzaddik, instead of it taking me a day, a week, a month, what will happen? I'll just be there. Says Ramosha Feinstein, what happened over here in the Psukim? What was the Kfitzas HaDerech? The Kfitzas HaDerech was that the Makom HaMikdash came to him. All of a sudden, he was at Har HaMoriah. How did Har HaMoriah come to him? Why did Har HaMoriah come to him? Why did all of a sudden the Beis HaMikdash appear at his feet? What did Yaakov Avinu do to be Zaycha? That one moment he's traveling, the next moment he's standing in the Beis HaMikdash, and he could daven to Hashem. Says Ramosha Feinstein, well, look at the psukim. I believe this part he says also. Look at the psukim. It says he stopped, he realized, He put his mind on that he didn't daven, that he missed the Makom HaMikdash, and therefore it came to him. What was the Kaddish Atzmacha B'Muterlach? What was the Divrei Rishos? What was the level of optional sanctification that Yaakov Avinu did here? Was by thinking and wanting and desiring to be at the Makom HaMikdash. And if you continue the Psukim, this is where things turn a little bit murky. The Psukim continue that what happens? All of a sudden, he realizes he's about to travel further and it's dark. So what happens? Okay, I'm going to have to spend the night. He lies down, and this was the most famous night probably in history. What happens during this night? This night, the rocks that he puts around them all start fighting with each other. The rocks want to all be onto the head of the tzaddik. At this night, the famous Jacob's ladder. This is where the dream happens. This is where the tzula mutzav arza, v'roishai magia hashamayma. But one second. What did Yaakov Avinu daven? What is Yaakov Avinu's tefillah? Ma'ariv. He davened Ma'ariv, but it was daytime. Again, let's go through the story in slow motion. I didn't want to have to say that. Let's go through the story in slow motion. What happened? He's traveling. He realizes he missed the Makom HaMikdash. He stops, he pauses, he thinks, he wants, he desires. Boom! Makom HaMikdash comes to him. You see, he says, Ramosha, you see a new type of Kvitz Haderech. You see a tzaddik wants to daven, a tzaddik wants something, a tzaddik feels bad, he misses something. Hashem gives it to him on a silver platter. But one second, ask Chassam Sefer, what's going on here? How did he daven Ma'ariv? Says the Chassam Sefer, when was this day in history? Says the Chassam Sefer, it was Friday night. Says the Chassam Sefer, when do you let a daven Ma'ariv early? Friday night. What's the ultimate Kaddish Atzmacha B'Muterlach? What is the ultimate sanctification of bringing the holy into the mundane? Friday night. It's Friday afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. Well, no, that would be too early in the summer. It's 6 o'clock in the summer. Nighttime is not for another 2 hours. Says the Chassam Sefer, Yaakov Avinu, Daven de Ma'ariv. He was Mikabel Tosefes Shabbos. And therefore, he was even able to daven Ma'ariv even before it came dark. What you see over here is, if you just think about this for a few moments, it's first of all just fascinating. Fascinating when you learn some Shatim and Chumash. We always say how, we unfortunately have the storyline of Chumash in our heads from when we're little kids and we never actually think about it again. But then, if you think about it, you start getting hit by these fascinating questions and you see incredible Shatim. The Chassam Sofer teaching us that he davened Ma'ariv, it was Friday night, he was Mekadesh, Shabbos. Maybe one could start davening. So he davened. Did he repeat Kriya Shema later? Is this a raya keneged the Goyin? Or Moshe Feinstein? You could get involved in the sugya over here. The Avos kept the Torah. What was going on over here? But what you see in a very simple but deep level when we put together what the Chassam Sofer is teaching us and how this unique form of Kvitz Haderech happened, as Moshe Feinstein is teaching us, is you see that Kaddish Atzmacha B'Muterlach is not so scary. That what does it mean? What it means is that during the mundane, it's a Friday, and what did Yaakov Avinu do? He felt bad that he missed the Makom HaMikdash. He wanted to be better. The desire, the want, the adding on those few minutes of Shabbos were the Divrei Rishos of Yaakov Avinu. That's the quintessential. What do we learn out Divrei Rishos from? Yaakov was what? He was Divrei Rishos. He was that third type of mitzvah, not mitzvahs aseh, not mitzvahs lois aseh, but the optional. But when you realize it through this lens, it's not so scary. It's not Divrei Rishos that, I have to all of a sudden become a tzaddik overnight, and I have to be a pirish and a kaddish, and I take one dot of this and one dot of that. No, what does it mean, Mekadesh Atzmacha B'Muterlach? It means, in every scenario, looking for one extra dot of holiness, a little bit more kedusha, adding on to Shabbos for a few more minutes. Maybe one will say, I'm not holding a waiting 72. Okay, does that mean you can't wait an extra 5 minutes? So one might question, what does that do for me? What does that do for you? An extra 5 minutes of Shabbos. One might say, I'm not holding or listening to the whole Kriyas HaTorah. Number one, look in the mirror. Are you really not holding it? Sometimes you're just not being honest with yourself. You don't want to realize that you actually are. Okay, but can you do a little bit? Maybe you won't have kavanah for the whole Shemona Esrei. That means you can't do anything. As many people repeat often, Yiddishkeit is not an all or nothing religion. And slowly, I actually saw last night that the Michtav Melio, Rav Dessler, is medayik in the words of Rabbeinu Bachai in the Chayvis Alvavos, in which he says over there very, very famously that Mish doesn't, Einoi Mamin, I don't remember the exact precise words, if you don't believe in Hashem, what are you believing in? Zulasai. Scary words. Scary words. He says, if you don't believe in Hashem, what does it mean you don't believe in Hashem? You're not boiteach in Hashem, you're boiteach bizulasai. And he goes on to explain, that means you trust in your job, you trust in your koycham vaytzim yadi, you trust in the boss, you trust in your wealth. No, you have to trust in Hashem. But you finish that paragraph and you get very, very depressed. What does that mean? That means I'm done. What do you mean? That means I'm done. I'm not holding it being 100% B'teach B'Hashem. So on the bottom in the article footnotes, they quote so beautifully, I believe it's from Rav Dessler, amongst many others, that explain that it's in levels. That's the spitz. That's where we hope one day before Yom Moisei at 120, that's where we want to be to. But life is on the journey to get there, and every little bit more that one is maimin is one little bit less that he's maimin bezulasai. So similarly, we'll plug it in over here that as we're working to be mekadesh atzmacha b'mutulach, a little bit more kedushin, of course, with the smell of the Chanukah donuts in the horizon, you could start playing this together with the oiros and the kedusha and the fires and the lights and the darkness and lighting up and every little bit, and you could go for as long as you want. But the point of the story is, let's realize that we all could be mekadesh atzmacha b'mutulach. And what happens when you have that thought, I want to be a job better, I want to be a little bit more? Maybe one day we'll realize that, believe it or not, we're standing in the Beis HaMikdash. Maybe one day we'll realize as soon as we want to be better, we'll look at our own houses and we'll say, hey, I am living in a place of a little bit of Kedusha. Maybe one day we'll wake up and we'll say, hey, I am a little bit of a tzaddik. I actually am. And how did I get there? I got there listening to the words of our Rabbeim, Ramosha Feinstein, etc., that the Kadesh Atzmacha B'Mutulach, one little bit more. Yaakov Avinu was Mekadesh Leil Shabbos that first week early. The first Leil Shabbos was an extra Tosefes Kedusha on the Mundane. B'siyata D'Shemaya, we should all be Zoicha. Beautiful words.